Welcome back to beginning Unreal Engine 4. Today I'm going to start off the series with a 2D game. So in the first video we took a look at installing the Unreal Engine 4, the Epic Games launcher, and then installing Unreal Engine 4.8, the new engine, and also it just got updated 4.8.2. You see that over here in the corner if I haven't cropped it out in the video. So basically what you're going to do is hit that little yellow launch button in Epic Games Launcher, and then you're going to wait for Unreal Engine 4 to launch. And then once you're in Unreal Engine 4, you're going to go from projects to new projects. And what we're going to take a look at here, this is going to be another short video. We're going to go over sort of like the UI, or the editor they call it. So we're going to load one of the sample 2D side-scroller projects and look at some of the stuff inside and see how they format their project in order to work best for them. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And one other thing, probably just delete this really quick just so I have a little bit more space. Let me go ahead and minimize this. Okay, so at the bottom we're going to leave everything here. We're just going to move on to a mobile tablet. It's just going to change a couple things. You could change it all inside the software anyways. We're going to do no starter content. It's already got starter content because it's a side scroller. And when we start making our games, we're probably going to go with, or not, well, our games or examples, whatever you want to call it. Probably going to start with the blank template instead of the 2D side scroller with no starter content in order to make our scene completely blank and a great place to start. Alright, so we're just going to call this we're just going to call this side scroll test, and it's in my Dropbox, and we're just going to create that project. And I'm just going to do a quick video going over kind of like how you move around the editor, and also the different panels and different editors and whatnot. And now I'm finally running kind of like a janky dual monitor setup, so I might also be using that as well to have notes over there, or also have editors over there for stuff that I want to look at. Also, that will help us out a little bit as well. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to check to see if this is audio. Seems that there is no audio. Okay, so I could basically talk at the same time here. This is a little UI mobile joystick. And as you saw there, all I did is hit play just to show you guys a little bit of what what the game plays like. And you can see here there's a couple different things. So this is Unreal Engine 4's 2D sort of libraries. They call them paper 2D, which has things called sprites, which are 2D images of either 3D objects or obviously just textures, right? And those are called sprites. So sprites are created from textures, not the other way around. So you can do that two ways. You can either have a 3D model and take just 2D pictures of that model, and then have them two different directions, obviously left and right, as you see. And then you have something called flipbooks, which is basically this animation that you see, which is basically you have textures. You have a texture, or what you could call a sprite map, even though it's technically a texture map, because you have a texture first and you create a sprite after it. So you have like a texture map or a sprite map, whatever you want to call it, and you cut out those sprites that are basically looped through an animation, looped through each sprite in order to have this particular sort of animation. And that's basically most of what paper 2D is. Also, of course, in 2D, the camera is basically an orthographic camera, meaning it's not a perspective camera, which means that you don't really have a field of view. It's just a square movement box, meaning that you're projected right over the top. As you see, there's not really any sort of there's no there's no real vision of 3D, except for, of course, a couple of different tricks, like I'll show you here. You have the different lighting, so these are probably 3D objects, and the different types of lighting on the side gives it this 2D sort of view. Okay, so let's take a look through the editor here ourselves. So over here on the left we have our basic primitives. This is basically the place object, which you could drag and drop different stuff like character controllers, lights, player starts, cubes, spheres, cylinders, whatnot, what we call primitives. And then you also have your lights, visual effects, probably some atmospheric fog and other kinds of emitters, particle emitters and whatnot. And then we have a different type of surface, like a NURBS almost. We're not going to use most of this stuff because we'll have our different types of stuff. I'm talking about, when I say most of the stuff, I'm talking about the primitives, like the BSP and the basic primitives. And then we have our brushes, different types of ways to blend weights and you know, erase colors and paint colors and different radiuses of the particular paint brush. And then we have our landscape, which we're not going to use much, foliage, and our geometry editor tool here. I'm not going to use much of those in a 2D game. We'll use it more in 3D. Other than that, we just have our basic panel up top with different types of setting bars, different types of blueprints. Blueprints is what was it? This is a certain type of it's Kismet. I think it's called Kismet, is the engine that they use for the blueprints, which is basically a visual editor, visual scripting engine. So Kismet is a visual scripting engine that uses blueprints, which I'll show you in a second. And you know, they play box and whatnot. And then we have our content browser at the bottom. This is sort of how we're going to be laying out our game, except for most likely we'll have our folders here, but you see here that they're already basically broken down. This is exactly how we're going to do it. See how you have textures, sprites, and here you have a paper flip book. That's where you can see the sprites looping through. And then this is a new folder I created. Different types of materials, the map. This is the particular map. It's just a level. It's a saved level. And then you have the different blueprints. So slide scroll, 2D side scroller character, and then here you have the blueprint. And then this runs the character, and this runs the game mode. Okay, so now that we're looking inside of the viewport, or whatever you want to call it, you can see I'll tell you a couple ways to be moving around the viewport. So upwards on the mouse wheel or towards your screen is to move forward, to scroll, to zoom, and then back on the mouse wheel is to scroll back. So back towards you is to scroll out. Then you have the left. Left is very, very interesting engine here. Left is to, like, this is just pan. This isn't pan. This is just rotate. Rotate the view. It's holding down the left click is to rotate your view and moving left and right, and it's locked on a single axis. I can only look left and right. If I go up on my mouse, it just pans forward. As you see, I'm moving forward very, very slowly. So this is more of like a delicate move compared to the zoom. So this is like to move around and get a real, you know, get into fine detail. While this is a little bit more of a coarse correction, this is a more fine zoom correction, as I have to move my mouse quite a bit. Then we have our right click, which is a full, you know, kind of unaxis locked view. But if I go forward, I look up. If I go back, I look down. And then left and right. And then finally, holding in the mouse button, we have the standard pan. So this is holding in the center mouse button, pressing it in, we have the pan. And also I could notice that these are actually, these are just 2D. Okay, so these are just 2D and they painted this in. Pretty cool. Alright, so another thing that we wanted to look at is selecting and the different types of shortcuts on the keyboard. So it's standard Maya layout, what made you know, the different types of shortcuts that you know, is famous by Maya, which is a 3D modeling software. We have Q on your keyboard is a shortcut for selecting, and that's usually, you know, that's usually obviously selected first. That's a default go-to when you start the engine. It starts out with the select mode. Then you have your W, which is like a move, which it already is. Q and W are the same thing, because once you click on it, it already has the select tool. As this is not a modeling software, so you don't really need the Q and the move tool to be two different things. Then you have E. E is the rotation tool, and you see the different types of axes, and all this stuff is color-coded. And if you look, let me move it over to the black so you can see it. You have your X, your Y, and your Z. So this particular game is actually flipped from most stuff. Actually, let me just check. Yeah, yes, it is. Most, even like mathematics. Here, let me go ahead and pan that so you have a better view. Even in mathematics, X would normally be here, Y would normally be here. And so this is just flipped a little bit. So basically, when we're working in our 2D game, we're going to be worrying about just the Y. So in a 2D game, Y is the depth, which basically controls the layers that stuff is rendered on top of each other or not. So as you see here, this is on top of the background, and then probably the character and this are on the same plane in order to have the 2D physics interact with each other. As you see, it's contact capsule there, and then you have a camera following. So let's just take a look real quick. I'll go over this actually in a second. So let's go ahead and take a look at rotating stuff. So this is rotating on the Y, what was that? That was the, I'm guessing that's supposed to be the green. So the green is the Y-axis. Then we have the blue axis, red axis. So here's locked on the red axis, and as you see, that's a sprite. So once you go to 90 degrees, the thing basically turns invisible. And then we have the blue axis. Okay, so that's E, and then R is the universal sort of scale button. So as you see here, you could scale locked aspect ratio, just in the Z in this case. I might say Y a couple times because a lot of stuff that's the Y, but in this case this is Z, which is almost exactly like mathematics, but these two, the X and the Y, are switched. And then we have forward and backward. Obviously, a sprite doesn't have any depth, so you can't actually make the Y go in and out. And as you see, it's changing down here, but the sprite can't have depth. Okay. Oops. And then we have, so the Z, already did that, and then we have the X. As you see, they're all color-coded. So Y is green, red is X, and blue is Z. And those are the different shortcuts. So if I go back to W or Q in this case doesn't work, I guess. They don't, it's just W, E, and R. So just go back to W, and then you can switch through back to W, because if I have E selected and I go to each one, it will still have E selected. And let's see if I could step back to where this is normal size. So I'm just Control-Zing back to this thing being normal size. Okay. Going back to W. That's basically it for this particular thing for the shortcuts. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the details panel over here, and also the world outliner, which is up here. So let's go ahead and go from the top down. So basically what this is this is talking about the stuff that is inside of your viewport here. So I'm just gonna get this really minimized, because we're probably not going to use that much. And we want to see a little bit more of this, and also have this a little more scaled. So we have something like that. Alright, so you see that we have our example map. We have this background. We have the background sprite that is in this folder. So they created a folder on top. And unlike Unity, I'm not smashing on that engine, but you could have folders inside of here that has all your stuff in it. So we can minimize and maximize that to clean up our stuff. I don't think that Unity actually has that unless you get the paid version. I don't know if the paid version has that either. So forget I even mentioned that, but I'm just noting that it has this. And then we have we have a label here, you know, basically this is all the stuff that's attached to the background, and in the example, they put it in a nice folder, so that's why these examples are very, very nice to look at to see how they set things up. So I'm going to go over at the end how they set things up, and then how we're also going to be manipulating stuff in a similar fashion, and how they have it nice and laid out. And here we have an autosave, so I'm going to save that. All the different ledges, as you see, they're not really numbered all that great. And they also have some in the sprite, but that's not a big deal. And then we have our character, which is here, and you also see that the character has an attached camera, which is there, and then also the player start, which is there. Now, let's go over the details, which is down here. So this is the details portion, where it has something very similar to Unity when it has something called components. Here you see adding components. It has a pretty standard transfer. So now we're going to look at just like one of these ledges. So here you see that that we have the X location, the Y location, and the Z location, the different rotations that we were messing with, and the different scales that we are messing with. 1, 1, 1 being standard, and also we have the static and movable, totally dynamic, allows dynamic shadows. And then we have, this is a type of sprite, so we have the sprite with the image mapped to it, and you have the different sprite color. The standard sprite material mapped to it, and material means that you could create different types of like a reflection and stuff like that, and opacity, and well, that's another one. You know, shiny. You know, the shininess and whatnot of that particular material. All could be through maybe manipulated through an editor. Different types of collision physics. Up here, physics and then collision. Different kinds of lighting, casting shadows, etc., etc. All different kinds of stuff, and then we could also rename it up here and add different types of components to this particular object. But here it says an actor. So instead of an object, everything in Unreal Engine is an actor, which means that it's like something. Because you know how an actor in a movie like performs an action, right? So it's like this is something that's performed an action. So if this was a movie, right, instead, you know, a video game, obviously, if this was a movie, each of the stuff inside the movie would be actors. Even though this stuff, because actors, you know, they interact with one another, so this character controller actor would, you know, manipulate with this ledge actor. So, and then you have, you know, camera, and also characters. You have character, actor, etc., etc. And then we have different types of blueprints, which I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. And let's go ahead and take a look at this character and see how he has a couple different things. It's still the same thing. It's a sprite, except for it's got a capsule on it, and it's got a collision capsule, and it's also got a character controller attached to it. So here you see that it's got some components added to it in order to give it a certain type of inherent interaction with the rest of the actors in the scene. For example, the collision with these guys here, that was added. And we have a lot of extra stuff added for different kind of character movement controllers, and manipulating all this stuff, and interaction with different things. We're going to get more into that when we start with our games. So let me go ahead and just talk really quick about the different types of editors. So as you see here, we have an atlas or a texture map. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. It's actually loaded in my other screen there. Let me just dock that. So as you see here, this is a sprite map or an atlas or a texture map, whatever you want to call it. And you see here that it has our animation, our run animation. So it starts from that standard standstill animation. The flipbook runs through, and this is another editor. So basically, Unreal Engine 4 is all comprised of different editors to do different actions. So we have a blueprint editor, We have a texture editor, we got a materials editor, we got the standard editor that you saw on the other screen, which is now right up here in this other tab. All different kinds of editors for all different kinds of things. I mean, there's an editor for everything in Unreal Engine. Sorry about that, taking a drink real quick. Here you see different types of things inside of this particular editor to change all different kinds of stuff. And this is pretty neat because you could actually like get it to cut out different things and different types of compression and, you know, file type, all different kinds of stuff. Alright, so that's one of them, and Sprites very similar, but if you double click on it, this is actually an animation editor. It's a flipbook editor, completely different editor. Sorry, I clicked the same thing. Oh, this is idle animation, so he's just moving back and forth. So let's look at like this Sprite editor. So here is a different editor. Let me just go ahead and dock this. So this is the Sprite editor. As you see, very, very different than all the rest of the stuff here. So what you would do is you would have the import the sprite map or texture map or atlas as a texture, and then turn it into a sprite, and then have it cut out each of those sprites in this particular editor here. But as you see here, the editor is completely different between the animation editor and the texture editor, as well as what you'll see here in a second is our blueprint editor. So let's go into the blueprints. Let's take a look at this side-scroller character, the blueprint. So this has also a different sort of move. As you see, there's no need for rotation, as this is all 2D stuff, but you can see that you could get very, very big as far as the how big the events are. And so the controls here are same thing with the scroll wheel. Forward is forward, back is zoom out, and it'll tell you to zoom up here top right. And then right click is how you dolly around. So basically what Blueprint is Blueprint is a visual program, a visual scripting editor, meaning that you need to know no code in order to do anything with Blueprint. So basically what you do is you create logic boxes in order to do different things. See, we have a function box, we have an input box, you know, and they have these triangles that basically what you could do is you could like link logic from one function to another or from one action to another. So here is something to handle an animation, and then this is the event, you know, when the event starts, when the map opens, it does this, and you have the target, and it's kind of really cool because everything is color coded. So like the green here goes to green here, the red goes to red, the yellow goes to yellow, this white goes over here to another white, blue goes blue, blue goes blue, and then red goes red, and then this is a white. Very, very intuitive setup. And also I could do almost everything in here without obviously creating values with the keyboard. I could just right click and then add anything into here. And you could have a blueprint for everything in your scene. You could have a blueprint to have it, you know, manipulate the world in a different way. And you see here that as I said, for everything else, the editor is different from all the other editors. We have something completely unique for blueprint mode, and we have, you know, more components on the left-hand side as we're looking at the 2D side-scroller character, and then we have different types of global variables. There's a camera, so we could reference to that. We have everything in our scene is right here. Then begin play up at the top. Update animation, input axis move right, input action jump. And we could also add new actions, different functions, variables, override functions. As you see, very, very large set, and even here you can see very, very large set of different types of stuff that we could add into our game to have it interact by simply passing through. And also you could install breaks and stuff in the logic to diagnose any problems that you have with the game and where you would want to change stuff, as you see with the simulate and the play. And also, you know, you could check for errors by hitting the compile and whatnot. So this is basically all I really want to talk about. This we're going to be in very a lot, and you see at top right there, paper character is the parent class with all these different types of selections. Okay, that's about all I want to talk about. So let's go one last time through and look at how they laid out and sort of organize their entire project, because this is how you want to organize your own project, and this is also how I'm going to teach how to organize a project. Is that we have the standard content, and there's just a single folder, and you have blueprints folder, maps folder, materials folder, sprites folder, textures folder. Very easy to go through. And then also up here in the world outliner, 2D example map, background, ledges, render FX, etc. All different kinds of stuff that we could work with. And you see that they're all conveniently loaded inside of a folder. So let's say if we didn't want to mess with the ledges, let's go ahead and close that out, and the render effects, all we wanted to do was mess around with the background. Now we have a completely clean world outliner that is easier to work with in a smaller view like that. Obviously you could drop it down like so, but yeah. So this is how we're going to set up our game and our examples to be very clean, easy to go through, very easy to manipulate, and save us time. You know, besides of course the input time that you need to put everything in a folder, it's going to save us time every time we go to look for it. We know exactly where to go look for it. One last time, left click is to select, W is move, E is to rotate, R is to scale. Then we have our viewing. So right click is to do the entire sort of rotate on your center on your pivot there, to just rotate around. Then we have the center mouse button is to do the standard pan. Left is to look left and right. Right is up and down is locked, and you could also go forward and backward by moving your mouse forward and backward. And then forward on the scroll is go forward, back on this wheel is to go backward. And obviously there's different kinds of things, like hitting F will focus you on that point. It will not. You could set your pivot around that point to where you rotate around that point, but that is for another video. Alright, so that seems to be it about going over this example, and we're going to be creating our, from the next video on, we should be creating a game of our own, and yeah. So this has been Steven from LegitTechTutorials. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, please subscribe for more videos like it in this series and other series as well. I will be looking for some sort of text supplement for this, but as of right now I have not found one. And yeah, subscribe for more videos in the series. I'd like to thank you for watching. Take it easy.